Welcome to the Outdoorsy Educator podcast, the show where curiosity meets the open road. I'm your host Alistair, and I invite you to join me as we explore the world through travel, adventure, nature, and the power of learning. Each episode we dive into inspiring stories from adventurers, educators, and global citizens. Whether it's in a classroom, on a local trail, or adventuring halfway across the world, there are stories to be told and lessons to share. So pack your curiosity, lace up your boots, and let's discover how the world can teach us all, one step, one story, one adventure at a time. Sydney Robinette, born and raised in Texas, is an educator with a unique global perspective for teaching and a heart for service. With over 6 years of teaching experience, she has lived and taught in 5 countries, including China, Estonia, and now Peru, gaining a deep appreciation for the importance of immersing yourself in diverse cultures and communities. An avid reader and painter of the outdoors, Sydney's passions are not limited to the classroom, but everything is fueled by her passion for community service and lifelong learning. Well, on this week's episode, we have a wonderful globe-trekking teacher, Sydney. Sydney, thank you so much for being here. How are you today?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited, a little nervous, but I'm ready to get into the thick of things.
Awesome. As am I. And by the end of this, I think all the nerves will have gone. Everything is going to be absolutely fine. Promise you. But why do you start off? Tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? Tell us about your career a little bit. Where are you now? Things like that.
Well, hello, my name is Sydney Robinette. I am an international school teacher. I actually started my journey off with Mr. Green here.
Hmm.
And from there, have worked in international schools in China, in Lithuania. I lived in Germany for a bit, studying migration policy in the EU. And then now I'm living in Peru. So I have been kind of just going with the flow of things. I've had a variety of big events that have taken place in my life to get me to where I am now. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Um, but I think at this stage in my life, I'm really just trying to be present, be grateful for the lifestyle that I have, and see where life takes me. Very good
I
with
love that. I
yeah.
love that. So my assumption is, you got into teaching, and was the idea always to travel and teach internationally, or did that kind of come once you'd become a teacher and you thought, what am I going to do? Or was it always kind of the plan to globe trek as you were teaching?
This is a question I've actually received a lot in my past. I think I've always had an innate curiosity, and I always find myself wanting to try new things, to read, and explore. So I think I've always had the travel bug within me. But
Hmm.
when I began teaching, I actually had to ask several people in my university program, as well as friends of friends, for how I can teach abroad, but not simply just teach English. And like I mentioned with my background in Germany, I have a strong interest in helping immigrant and refugee populations. So I was trying to do something that allowed me to be globally impactful or allow me to travel. And it just seemed like everything fell into place with teaching. Um, so I'm really grateful for that. Shout out to searchassociates.com because that is
Right.
really what got me, I would say, more prepared for how to move abroad and what to expect and what schools can offer that is beyond just teaching English.
Right, because that's probably the assumption people have. Certainly, one I would have is, oh, Sydney's
Mhm.
off to teach in China. You're probably teaching English, and of course, that's a wonderful thing. But it just sounds to me like you wanted to go several levels deeper than just teaching basic English and moving on.
Yes, I wanted to be able to use the skills that I was learning from my university in all subjects, um, but also see if there was a way that I could find not just a program, but a school that was I guess, more encompassing.
Right.
um, but, teaching English abroad, I want to make it clear that it is still a very hard job. And
Oh, yeah.
I know many people are interested in that because it works with their schedules, but I wanted to see how I could combine my educational experience with my love for learning, plus seeing how different education systems around the world also respond differently to learners and meet their needs. So,
That's wonderful. I've got so many questions. I'm just trying to put them in some kind of cohesive order because I
mhm,
know I could just start firing questions. But I think going kind of chronologically to
mhm,
begin with would be a great thing. So you were based in the States. Obviously, you and I met when you were a student teacher across the hall from me
mhm.
here in Texas. Um, you did that. You got qualified, and then was China was your first stop. Is that correct?
Yes, it was. I arrived 6 months before the pandemic. So that in of itself was a very interesting experience, but I'm actually very grateful for it. I spent all 3 years there. And it really built up my confidence in how to approach and navigate situations that were very different, as well as get me more confident in being able to solo travel as um, for most of my teaching abroad experience has been done solo as well.
Right. And China, I always feel, is a very interesting topic because I don't know if there's a country in the world that people's opinions differ on from those who have not been to those
Mhm.
who have been.
Yes.
I know a couple of teachers who have either been to China or worked and taught in China,
Mhm.
and it's a wonderful thing to see how their opinion of China, the Chinese people,
Mhm.
is so vastly different once they come back.
Yes.
What were your thoughts going into it, and then what did you discover while you were there? And of course, you were there during the pandemic, so
Yeah.
that's another thing entirely that I'd love to hear about. But what we,
Yes.
I'm sure you had some natural concerns going somewhere vastly different than where you're from for your first stop, so, or some nervousness. Is that just traveling? I'd love to hear how that what you did feel beforehand, or were you just excited? And then what was your opinion after you were there for say 6 months or a year? How did things change for you?
Well, so beginning my journey, like I mentioned before, I really was curious about the world. I have been watching National Geographic religiously. I read a lot of books on history, and I really love to follow different Pinterest boards of places to see. For me, it's beyond tourist attractions. It's how like people's lives can be so different and yet so similar to mine. So when I had finally heard of how I could get into this market and that I was finally qualified, um, I had been chatting with someone on Facebook Messenger. It was like a friend of a friend who had moved to China like 10 years ago. And they were like, oh, we'll just put you in contact, see how y'all connect with each other, if they're interested and all. And I remember working in Texas and just thinking, like, I really like this, but I have so many loans that I just got hit with. I was going to pay for university all by myself, and I didn't understand the loan system when I had taken out loans while I was living there.
Hmm.
So, me and my family were all actually kind of stressed out because we were trying to manage um, our family finances, and then me not only contributing to that, but also how to manage my loans itself. So after that, I had this situation where I was notified that I would be not able to join the following year at the school that I was working at. And it was like within 48 to 72 hours, I got a message from the individual in China that said, hey, we've been following you on LinkedIn. They had no idea that I had just not been renewed a contract, but they said we have a position that was exactly what I was teaching for fifth grade. And they said if you were interested, we can do an interview either today or tomorrow. So I accepted the interview, not telling really anyone what was going on. And when I got it, The interview went really well, and because me and that individual had been talking back and forth for so long, we I just felt very calm and kind of similar to what I had told you before we started the podcast of being able to follow your gut when things feel peaceful, like if it feels like a sigh of relief, then to move forward with it. That is something that my mother has taught me growing up. And that is just what it felt like. It just felt like everything was falling into place. So um, I think it was just more of like a calling to do what I was meant to do.
Yep,
Um,
I can
yeah.
completely relate. And I just realized that, something that I just said was probably slightly out of line. You might not have been nervous. You might not have had any trepidation. Some
Mhm.
people would, but I'm
Mhm.
excited to find out as we get into this more and more of your feelings as you've gone from country to country. Now, did they sort of handle the work visa? Because I imagine, there's some serious paperwork that goes into all of this. Did
Yes,
they help you handle that, kind of walk you through that?
China had some very intense visa processing, and the
Hmm.
school was able to cover it. I would say most of the international schools, not most, every single international school that I've worked at,
Right.
they have part of that as your like settling in package, where you get an upfront um, cash amount when you arrive that allows you to purchase things for your apartment. And then it also gives you a reimbursement for whatever you needed for the visa process. So it can be complicated, but that's why for me, finding a school that has the resources to be able to provide that, as well as like a very regimented idea of the legal system, is very important. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because there are some teachers that come on for an international school or for
Hmm.
English programs, bilingual schools, but they arrive and there's so many missing parts to their visa that they actually have more complications, and they're put on a special list, and it becomes very hard for them to leave the country, for example, or maybe they can't like get their work visa, so they're technically not doing things properly, and it's not worth the risk. So being able to like find a school that is able to take care of you is so, so important.
Yeah, I imagine that's the last thing you want is to get into paperwork headaches, especially
Mhm.
once you're there. That sounds
Definitely.
like the last thing. So I'm so glad that they were able to take care of you. And how long were you there before the pandemic hit?
I was there about 6 months. Um, yes, the pandemic, I was actually in Shanghai about 48 hours or so before they shut the city down. And then
Right.
they ended up shutting down the rest of the country. Um, that in of itself, I love China. I would love to go back, but I think the China that I know, those 3 years that I was there, is very different than, let's say, the China that is now. Um, there was a lot of policy changes, and of course, backlash between foreigners and locals based on how the pandemic was being handled, both internally in the country and then people that were being brought back in or people that were leaving. There was a mass exodus of expats. So
Hmm.
I think the political situation was a little difficult, but at the same time, that first year of the pandemic was actually very peaceful in China because even though the country was shut down, you still were able to travel a lot within the country itself. You just had to jump through a few hoops to make sure that you're not spreading anything, you're not contagious, and I think they really took care of their population in that aspect. Yeah, it had to be strict with the amount of people that are living there. So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, I think, in my limited research about the pandemic, it seemed to, in some ways, bring out the best in people and communities and then also bring out the worst in some regards. Maybe that was
1000%.
out of fear,
Yes,
lack of knowledge. We were all learning and kind of, building the plane as we're flying it kind of thing during the
definitely.
pandemic, especially in education. Um, so, what did you see in terms of positivity in the pandemic. Like here, we did see, certainly neighbors coming together,
Mm,
and if somebody had something that another one needed, there was a lot of dropping things off on the porch, and
right.
but then also fear can bring out the worst in people. Um, what did you see sort of during the pandemic as an expat? You would have quite a not a unique view, but certainly one that would be different to many people.
I could approach this answer in a multifaceted way. So,
Right.
on one hand, when it comes to, let's say, when you first view someone on the street, ethnically, I am Filipino, but a lot of people would assume that I'm either Chinese or mixed. So, a
Hmm.
lot of the locals would treat me very different compared to a lot of my coworkers who were not Asian. And in the negative aspect, it would be a very large difference in the way that my coworkers were treated compared to me.
Hmm.
But of course, once I open my mouth and they realize that I do not speak any Mandarin,
Right.
um, I would be kind of like lumped together. And for me, this was an interesting dynamic because pre pandemic, I would see how my coworkers that were not Asian looking were treated, and they were like celebrities. People would want to hand them their babies, take pictures with them. They wanted to touch their skin. It was a kind of revolutionary concept based on where I was staying. Um, but to see that, like, progressively change and also being mindful of even sharing like where you are from because of the geopolitical situation. We have the American State Department saying, oh, China's doing this, and then you have Chinese news that you can translate, saying this about Americans. So being mindful of your presenting identity and then your actual identity was something to balance. um, but the positive aspect is that I feel like I have formed very lifelong and strong relationships with the people that had to stay during that time, both that were locals and both that were expats, because we genuinely needed each other
Hmm.
to be able to get through the challenges of the multiple requirements that was needed every day, whether it be like daily COVID testing or people coming to your house to taking pictures, or maybe for example, we had several coworkers who were out of the country, but they had pets that needed to be taken care of, or an
Hmm.
apartment that had to be cared for while they were away, and just really trying to be there for each other when we couldn't be close with our families. Like, it was very hard to even purchase a ticket to leave. Like, you can't just get on a plane and go. You had to take steps to even enter the airport or to even get into a hospital to get tested as a foreigner. So it was tough, but
Right.
also it built community. So
Right. Right.
yeah. I love China though. I think it's definitely one of my favorite countries I've ever visited. So um yeah, so many positive things as well.
Yeah, it's I think most of us, if we could snap our fingers and eradicate the pandemic from history like it didn't happen, we would. But there's got to be, there's so many lessons learned during
Mhm.
those tough times that we can all carry forward, and especially you being in a foreign country,
Mhm.
very different to life here. So many lessons you must have carried forward to different situations in your life, and it must have changed how you handle those situations.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, very much so.
I would imagine you sort of go, well, actually, this might have seemed like a big deal, but look at what I've already come through. I can handle this. Um,
Yes.
I would
It does
imagine
make
it's a lot of that.
Yes, it does make handling maybe more stressful or sudden situations be something that I can take in stride. I definitely think
Right.
it's built my confidence and patience. So it was a good learning experience.
Fantastic. And we'll come back to China in a bit, but you left there and did you go straight to Lithuania? Did you come back to the States to sort of reset? What was the next step of this international journey?
Yes, so I had been looking in either teaching in Japan and Korea or
Hmm.
in just moving to Europe. A dream of mine would be to live in, bless you, in Italy or Spain. So I was looking in that general direction, but a lot of the packages that schools offer, again on Search Associates, they were more encompassing with healthcare and with um, housing, for example. In Europe, if you are looking in that market, as you pretty much know as a teacher, the schools will
Yes.
offer you maybe a manageable salary to get by, but you really would be paying paycheck to paycheck, or they would not offer housing at all or insurance at all. You have to do that out of pocket. So I was trying to find something as inclusive as China was, because wow, like I was able to pay off all of my loans after living in China for those 3 years. So
Fantastic.
yes, it was. It
Yes.
genuinely was like a weight off my chest. So I applied all around Europe. I got a few offers, but decided on Lithuania,
Hmm.
and that is my home away from home. I miss it genuinely. I miss it so much. Um, it was a traumatic ending, and I hope to go back one day. Um, and say hi to everyone that,
Right.
yeah.
And how long were you in Lithuania for?
I was there about 2 years.
About 2 years. Okay, so plenty of time to truly immerse yourself in the
Yes.
culture, and it's one of those places that is not on the most people's sort of tourist map.
But it
Um,
should. It
it.
really, Lithuania is a gem.
Mhm.
It is small but so full of nature. I absolutely love the people. They are so down to earth, and they're very humble, they're very straightforward, and they're hardworking. Um, I genuinely feel a lot of the Lithuanian friends that I have made are probably some of the most loyal people that I've made. You do have to work towards a relationship and a friendship with them, but the time that you do spend on cultivating these relationships are so worth it, because I feel like I have been able to develop very strong foundations with
Mhm.
with my friends there, and there genuinely is just so much to do, and their love for the outdoors, for their history, for especially a lot of their old traditional practices are still being played out today. And it's beautiful to see how they can live harmoniously with them.
Right. I
Yes.
love that, and one of the first things I think of if you're going from the States, geographically a very large country, as diverse as it is, to
Mhm.
China, again, geographically another enormous country, and then to Lithuania, which
Yeah.
is
Very
tiny,
small.
tiny wee country. So
Yeah.
it's you're the rest of Europe, well, especially Eastern Europe, is so
Mhm.
accessible.
Yes.
It must have been a great opportunity to see many different things while you were there.
Absolutely. And I remember thinking, like, my first 2 weeks there, I was kind of freaked out because I was like, where is everyone? And people are like, oh, there's so
Right?
much traffic. And, oh, they're so busy today. And I'm looking around and I'm like, maybe I'm used to, like people really being in my bubble after living in China, and, just the noise and the crowds. But coming to Lithuania, it was like, oh, it's so peaceful, it's so quiet. And their capital, Vilnius, isn't the only place that I recommend people to see, but wow, like it is absolutely gorgeous. I think it has the most churches in Europe. Um,
Really? Right?
yes, but you definitely get the mix of post-Soviet buildings plus these
Mhm.
grand architecture plus this like modern landscape, um, all while being maybe a 15-20 minute walk from the forest. So I really loved it. It had everything in one. It's my forever home.
I absolutely love it. So in the, I think it was the mid '90s, maybe in the late '90s. I don't know if you've ever heard of Michael Palin, quite a famous British traveler. He was in Monty Python. This is where he broke into but then started doing travel shows in the mid 80s.
Mhm.
I won't bore everyone with the whole story of Michael Palin, but the BBC asked him to do it around the world in 80 days, like Phileas Fogg. No planes, can it be done? And he really broke into the travel television world at that point, and has done easily half a dozen, maybe 10 different travel series over the years. But one of my favorite is he traveled all through Eastern Europe in the late 90s after the Soviet Union had broken up and all these new countries. And he wrote a book, and there was a TV series called New Europe. And since reading that 25, maybe even 30 years ago, I've always
Mhm.
had this desire to take a trip down through Eastern Europe. I've done Western Europe, lots of it, not all of it, but I think it would be and every travel show I watch that bases itself in Lithuania, in Poland, in Slovakia, wherever it may be, is just fascinating.
Yes.
So I'm glad to hear that you had it. It sounds like it was everything you hoped it would be and more.
Yes, I the only thing I would take away,
Hmm.
if I could, is I didn't mind the cold. That was a completely new experience for me. That truly was cold, cold. But I would say to prepare myself more for how dark it can get because it's
Hmm.
so up north. I was not prepared, coming from Texas. And even in China, in Qingdao, it was a beautiful coastal city. Sometimes it would be gray because the clouds and pollution might be trapped by the mountains. But this was like dark at 3 p.m. We might have an
Hmm.
average of 4 hours of daylight for the month. That was hard mentally, but when it was summertime, spring, it was incredibly beautiful, and just light like all day.
It's very interesting. Of course, when I have friends or anyone who's been to Scotland, and I have conversations fairly
Mhm.
frequently with people. Oh, you're from Scotland. I've been to Scotland. The one thing that people generally don't account for and surprises them is if they go in the summer, it's still light at 10 o'clock at night, and the
Mhm.
sun is up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning.
Mhm.
But if you go in December, like you said, it's dark at 4:30, and the
Yeah.
sun's not up until much later in the morning.
Mhm.
And it really can have an effect on your personality. But is it seasonal affective disorder? Like, it's a real thing.
Mhm. Yes,
It can truly affect how you act, what you do, your outlook um, on life especially during the winter months.
absolutely. And I knew we had some coworkers who would recommend what is it called? A sun lamp. So
Right.
I would religiously sit down during breakfast to sit in front of that, and I feel like it did help a bit. But um, the benefit of living in the Baltics is that hopping points to some brighter countries were fairly cheap and easy to
Mhm.
get to. So that would be my a way of being able to get that vitamin D back into my system. Yeah.
And I could sit and talk to you about this for hours, but if you could choose one place that you went to that truly helped you, out of reset is the right word, but truly get the sun that you needed, where would that one place have been that you took a little, say, a weekend break to from Lithuania?
Ooh. Mm.
I hate to pigeonhole you and ask one. Give us a couple. Give us a couple.
I would say I don't know if any of these would be considered a weekend trip. I think weekend trip would have to be something definitely closer. But
Okay.
going to Valencia, going to Nice in France,
Hmm.
Split in Croatia, all of those were such beautiful scenery, amazing food, warm people, of course, sunny weather. And I think those really recharged my brain in a way that other countries didn't. But I was able to travel a lot thanks to living in Vilnius. It was affordable enough that I could save and travel on my teaching salary. So I feel very grateful for that.
I love that. I think it's fantastic. I just spoke to a good friend of mine called Roland, that will be last week's episode by the time this one comes out, and
Mhm.
he spoke. Um, camping. It's about 3 weekends a month he goes camping, and we talked quite a bit about just the connection to nature and how the last 100 years or so as the human race we've gotten away from that, but we truly are meant to be in nature and feed ourselves through sunlight, through the forest, through that connection. And it sounds like even the hustle and bustle of teaching around the world and being in being in Eastern Europe and teaching, you're seeking that a bit,
Yes.
and appreciating that reconnection. So you were in Lithuania. How long were you there for?
In Lithuania,
Yes,
about 2 years.
about 2 years. And then, am I correct in saying you went to Germany to study?
Yes, during one of my
Yes.
summer breaks, I had went to a university in Berlin,
Hmm.
and the purpose of the class was to compare EU migration policy to American and a little bit of Canadian migration policy. I was at the time going to a refugee slash migrant detention center in Lithuania. Um, and through word of mouth, I have been told that they have some fairly strict camps compared to other countries just because of, I believe it's a strait that connects Lithuania to the rest of the EU. So they're very mindful of who can get in and get out.
Hmm.
So I just wanted to understand policies better, to understand the people that I was helping to volunteer with in Lithuania. Um, but I was only there about a month. I
Right.
was on the outskirts of Berlin. I like Germany, but I don't know if Berlin was was the place for me.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it just must have been a fascinating experience.
Mhm.
Um, I just imagine that kind of experience and immersing yourself in that. You must have left every day with good feelings about things that are being done, probably some things that maybe angered you, things that you heard. But what a wealth of knowledge to then take to other places and other communities.
Mhm.
I think it would be fascinating. Did you go back to Lithuania from Germany before you went to Peru? Is that correct?
So that was the summer in between my first and second year of Lithuania.
Okay. Okay.
And then when I was in Lithuania, I had a medical emergency. Actually, it was why I had to leave.
Right.
Um, I had got COVID. It wasn't my first time getting COVID,
Hmm.
but 2 weeks after I had healed, I got the flu. Um, and it started off very simple. I guess, like, I had a pretty high fever, but it just wouldn't break. Um, And I remember like moving my bed onto the floor so I didn't have to move a lot in my apartment.
Right.
But then it got to the point where I was feeling so weak that all I could do is crawl around my apartment. And by that time, I had taken so many days off. I ended up calling my boss and some coworkers, some friends, just to be like, hey, I really think like I need some help. Um, and I ended up being hospitalized for 2 weeks.
Goodness
And
me.
during that time, they basically said they don't understand why my body's reacting this way. Maybe I had a neurological reset. I was going through some other events mentally during that time. So I guess it was just very stressful. And the combination of all three, I couldn't stand on my own, I couldn't walk on my own. And what was 2 weeks ended up being me needing to be flown back to the US with my family, where I was then in a wheelchair for about 6 or 7 months and had
Goodness
to,
me.
yeah, relearn how to walk for another 2 or 3 months. So I was in physical therapy pretty much 4 days a week. And it really was a life transforming experience. I left my apartment the way it was. I had friends pack it up and send me things for me. My school was really gracious and understanding with, me not being able to continue my year. Um, and even thinking about it now makes my heart break a little bit. But At the same time, I think all of my travels, especially with my journey in China, kind of gave me the resilience and mindset to try to continue pushing on. There wasn't really another option. Um, and from there, I got offered a position in Peru. The school that I'm working at now actually reached out to me when I was looking for jobs. Um, at that point, I was beginning to walk more comfortably, more confidently, but I was
Hmm.
actually not looking at teaching. I thought this was like, maybe this is a sign from the heavens that it's time for me to move on from teaching and go like strictly into humanitarian work. I was applying to a bunch of jobs for asylum seekers. And I wasn't getting any hits,
Right.
but I got this email from the school randomly, and here I am in Peru.
And without asking you, obviously, to divulge anything you don't want to, did you end up with some resolution as to what happened? Or
No,
it's just in the past now?
I have seen so many specialists and doctors. Um, no one has been able to give me a diagnosis. At the time, it was very frustrating because I needed like paperwork, I needed aid, I needed insurance, especially when the insurance from Lithuania ended. That was really hard. And it was really tough to find specialists that I could afford in the
Hmm.
US. Um, yeah,
Right. So it's just now, and but now you're doing well. Like these, it's
for the most part, yes, there are
good.
still some days that I am feeling fatigued, and
Right.
that is a lesson to teach me that I have to listen to my body, even if I want to do a million things and my brain is going, a mile, 100 miles per hour. I really have learned my lesson of I need to just listen to my body and respect it first. So,
Good advice for us all, I think. So you've now arrived in Peru. How long have you been there? What are you teaching? How long do you anticipate? You're in Lima, is that right?
yes, I'm in Lima.
Yes.
I have been here about 2 months now.
Right.
And my contract will be for 2 years. So I have enough time to explore South America, explore around Peru. But because of the medical incident,
Hmm.
I am really taking it slow with high altitude travels here. So I think exploring Peru more will be have to I will wait. I don't want to like jinx
Right.
anything or come too early. So it was a really big deal for me to be able to have the capability to travel again. Um, it's been a very tough year, tough transition. My mom had cancer
Oh, I'm sorry
um,
to hear
this
that.
year, so it really
Mm.
has been like a 1-2 punch. But that is why, for me, going slow, seeing where things are, and just enjoying the moment, being more present is all I can live up to at the moment, and that's fine enough for me.
Yeah,
uh,
absolutely.
yes,
Yes, I'd imagine. Well, it obviously has going through a traumatic event, if I can say that, does shift your perspective, and you come out of it on the other side with a renewed vision of what's important and how to care for your body, and taking your time when you need to take time.
absolutely.
So
Yes.
good for you doing that. And then, with regards to traveling and teaching, what do you think will be next? Do you have your eyes on a certain another country? Are you going to be ready to come back here, or is it just an open book at this point?
Right now, it's an open book. I think
Hmm.
the way this past year has played out, it really, for so long, I've had to only think of like, do I have enough strength or mental fortitude to get through, the next few hours or to get through the end of the day? And I think this
Hmm.
mindset has kind of stuck with me of I'm just going to try my best and what happens will happen. I can dream of, going here. I would love to go back to Spain. I would love to go to Italy,
Of
but
course.
pre-medical incident, I was very much like, this is my 5-year plan. This is what I'm gonna
Right.
do in 2 years. I'm gonna hit this benchmark. And if I don't, I was really hard on myself and right now, I want to see if Peru can be my home away from home.
Right.
Is something that I can settle in more, or, if not, then it just means there's more of the world to experience.
I love it. What a great attitude. Something I would love to ask you, and if you're not comfortable
Mhm.
answering, please just say. But you've obviously been, you studied immigration patterns, and being an immigrant yourself, being part of the expat community, like the views on immigration in different countries.
Mhm.
How has that changed from place to place? Both people viewing you and then other people coming into their country. Have you noticed big differences in the different countries where you've worked?
Yes and no. I think we will always have either a very liberal or a very, what would be the correct word?
Right.
you
Not
know,
liberal.
a
Yes.
very right
Yes.
perspective on things. But I also think, for example, if I'm just thinking of the expat community,
Hmm.
when I first started out, and something that really frustrated me, it's something I actually just put as one of my tips on my TikTok, was that when you travel as an expat, I think it should be natural. It should be important that you not only, of course, learn some things of the local language, or maybe a little bit of a historical background so you can understand like what topics to avoid or maybe questions to ask. Um, but I feel that it's very important to not place your expectations of conformity of that culture to
Hmm.
you. Like, you should be the one integrating, you should be the one going out of your way to understand and be open minded. And I felt that when I first started this lifestyle, there was many individuals, many expats that did not have that mindset. They were like, these were expectations that I brought from, my home and my privileges back in the country that I'm from. And
Hmm.
I'm here to take advantage of ABC. And that never really sat right with me. Um, but I feel like the more that I have traveled and the more expats um, that I've met, I guess there has been just a little bit of a shift in that mentality, and they are more willing to be more open minded, and, even being mindful of their physical or um, body language when they're interacting with locals. I'm not a guru. Like, I'm definitely, I make my mistakes too. That's part of the traveling
Of
experience.
course. Yes.
Um, but I think there is a little bit more respect that I'm seeing on the expat regard. Um,
Good.
when it comes to locals and their view on migration, I think it's definitely based on country by country because of things like crime, or I would say that would
Mhm.
just be the biggest negative feedback you might hear from a local. It's just like, oh, we are allowing multiple people to come here, and there isn't really any resources for us to give them because we ourselves are also struggling. Um, or it's the opposite, where you have all these expats moving into a part of the city, and they're gentrifying it, and now
Right.
locals, like, who need the money to support their businesses. It helps on that front, but then they can't afford to live there anymore. So it becomes a very complex system of give and take. And I think that also plays into the part of your job as a tourist or as a traveler, is like, how can we negate that impact as much as possible? Um, but it's kind of hard. I
Right.
recognize that. For example, I'm an international school teacher, and a lot of the populations that I've worked with are in higher socioeconomic classes. And for me, it's important to acknowledge my privilege because I recognize I can save money, that I might be paid more than um, local staff, or that the populations I help don't necessarily trickle down at times. And
Right.
that's something that I have been trying to navigate in my teaching journey because I do want to be mindful of my impact on the local community as an expat. But not everyone thinks that way.
Right.
So that was a long answer, but
No, it's an incredibly unfair question in a lot of ways because it's such a complex, complicated, a complex issue. So I really do appreciate it because, again, you have a pretty unique insight into this. You are on the ground, even though you're working, perhaps, as you said, in an international school with higher socioeconomic students. It's an invaluable perspective and a really interesting response. So, yeah, thank you for that. Um, Now, I've got to ask you a question because just because I think would be interesting. Have you ever thought about writing a book about all of this or some kind of guide? Because I imagine a lot of people, especially in education, but in other fields too, would kind of go, "I'd love to do that, but I don't know how," or "I'm nervous about it," or "What about this? What about that?" Have you ever thought about maybe you have written a lot of this down about your experiences?
so my bucket list does include writing a book, and
Wonderful,
I would
good,
love to do that. I do have this little, it's not a journal, it's more of like a spreadsheet. I'm a spreadsheet
right?
girl. And I do like to ask very informal, very short interview questions from people that I meet of their life lessons that I've been holding on to. Um, I just don't know how to put it all together, but I would love to do that. I would love to do more
Yeah.
like video based content. Um, but it's definitely like a learned skill that I have not obtained yet.
Absolutely. A good friend of mine often, I remember him saying to me that every teacher has a book in them, whether it's a children's book or something else. And in my career recently, I've transitioned more and more into working with pre-service teachers. And I
Mhm.
just imagine being able to present them with a guide or a book that you have written about qualifying as a teacher, and then
Mhm.
becoming a true global citizen with your educational qualifications and skills as the backbone for your travel. So I'm going to highly encourage you to put these things into writing
That
because
sounds like a great idea.
yeah, it's an amazing story. I've got this vision now of in 5 or 10 years about handing people your book and
Oh,
saying, I knew her when. So
well,
no
we should
pressure.
talk more. We should figure out
Let's
how to
talk
how to
more.
make that
No
possible.
pressure. I think it'd be a wonderful thing,
I would
a
love that.
wonderful gift for new teachers to have.
Thank you.
So we'll discuss that. You have transitioned beautifully into the next stage of this podcast because I'd like to ask you
Okay.
3 questions, and if you need to pause for a minute, please do. But is there one piece of music or audiobook that has been particularly, or physical book that's been particularly impactful in your life? Something that you can listen to over and over again, or read over and over again, and really has given you something profound.
Yes, it is called Invisible Cities. I can't remember the author. He's a classic Italian author. And it's basically about the story of um, Genghis Khan. And he has this person, I don't know if it's Marco Polo. I need to re look that up. But basically, he sends them out exploring and he comes back every single chapter telling about a city. And at the end of the book, it basically shares that every single city that he described was the same city. And it makes me think of how my perspective influences the way I view my travels or a country or people. So it's just a healthy reminder of the variety of ways that you can look at your reality and then
Right?
how your actions are um, influenced by it. So it doesn't like come across that deep. It's
No,
very
it
much like
does.
this this city is like this, but when you really boil down to what happens at the end, you're like, oh, he's just describing one city, but from different points of view, and it's really beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, one of my perhaps the most impactful book of my life. I've got a couple.
Mhm.
One of them in particular, A Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson, is fairly surface level. There's a lot
Mhm.
of funny moments. It's nothing too deep, but it opened my eyes to a world I didn't know much about, and I read it 20 years ago, and continues to be impactful to this day. So, sometimes it's really shallow stuff, sometimes super deep stuff that really just speaks to us. So, I mean, I'm going to look up Invisible Cities when we get off this call, and I think that would be fascinating to read. My second question for you: how do you handle moments of self doubt or uncertainty?
Ooh. Hmm. I think I don't think there's an answer to that, simply
Okay.
because for me, it seems to be an evolving journey. And actually, the past 2 days has been really mentally difficult for me. I feel um, a little overworked at the moment,
Hmm.
and I feel like I haven't really been showing up for myself. And um, sometimes it's just waiting it out. Sometimes it's reminding myself, like sometimes I'll create a list of like, oh, these are the things that I've accomplished that maybe in the moment I didn't really pay attention to how big of a deal that is, and look how far you've come. Um,
Hmm.
it could be listening to a motivating podcast, or going to the gym, getting those getting the
Hmm.
endorphins out. Might be the wrong word, but cooking myself some good food. Yeah, just really taking time to show up for myself is the closest
Good.
answer I can
Good.
give.
No, no, perfect. And I'm very aware. I'm just throwing questions at you that you
Mm,
might have an immediate answer for, and then other times you might, and that's perfect. But my
yep.
last one for you: what does success mean to you? What does it look like to you? And how do you think what you view as success might have evolved over the years?
Okay, hard hitting questions.
That's right. It's the last one of these spontaneous ones, I promise.
um, so pre medical incident, I like to, I guess, view my life in chapters. Pre medical incident, I was a big planner, and success looked like to me one, paying off student loans because it really was a lot. I had no idea what I was doing, and
Hmm.
neither did my family. And um, there really wasn't going to be a way that I was going to be able to balance paying that off on top of, even like getting an apartment for my own. So being able to work abroad has given me that financial freedom.
Hmm.
Um, But success also looks like just being able, for me at that time, to be able to speak more confidently and advocate for myself. I felt like I was a very passive person. Um, and I don't think I had a lot of confidence. Um, Even with all my traveling, it gave me skills to feel confident. It gave me the ability to be more perceptive of my surroundings. But in regards to being perceptive of myself and what I want, and like what I truly want, and not being scared to ask for that, I think was something I was still very like holding off on. Um, Post medical success to me, I think just boils down to how can you allow yourself to feel like a kid again? And how are you contributing to make other people feel the same in a positive way?
I
Um,
love that. Yeah, these are not easy life lessons for any of us to learn, whatever stage of life we're in. Um, so I absolutely love that. Now, if people would like to find you online, follow your journey, perhaps ask you a question, where can people find you?
my Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube are all under Womanverse Travels, Womanverse_travels. Um, I just bought a new camera, so hopefully I can make longer formatted videos. I'm really having fun playing with like all the edits.
Yeah,
Um,
we both Sydney and I ended up buying the exact same camera a couple of months apart. So I'm quite excited to learn alongside you about
yes.
all the
There's a lot
things
to
that
learn.
this. Yeah, it's a complicated little machine, but I think it's incredible. I've watched
Mhm.
people on YouTube who are well seasoned with it do wonderful things, and that's one of my goals this summer. Sounds like it is for you too, is to really get to grips with this.
Definitely, yes.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, Sydney, I cannot thank you enough for giving up your time, especially it sounds like it's been a very busy season at work recently. So thank you so much for giving up, I mean, an hour of your time to do this. It's been wonderful talking to you. Thank you very, very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and for thinking of me at all. I've always wanted to do a podcast, so for it to happen in person is crazy.
Absolutely. Well, I feel honored that we were your first podcast, and I've got a funny feeling you will be back. So thank you very, very much indeed.
Thank you, Alistair.
Thank you again to this week's guest, and I hope today's episode was as enjoyable for you as it was for me, and perhaps even inspired your next adventure. If you did enjoy the show, please be sure to subscribe, leave a review, or follow us wherever you get your podcasts. You can find more information at theoutdoorseyeducator.com or follow us on Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook. Until next time, thank you so much for listening to the Outdoorsy Educator podcast.